Are GRCs still impenetrable fortresses for the People's Action Party? Well, that's something opposition veteran Chiam See Tong once said, and it's what we're analysing today, a week post-GE 2020.
Wins for the opposition in Aljunied and Sengkang, plus close fights in East Coast and West Coast. Those results appear to dispel Mr. Chiam's impression.
And sharing more on this is political correspondent Linette Lai. Welcome, Linette. Now, political experts that you spoke to said having a minister helming a GRC doesn't magically make it invincible. East Coast, West Coast, and Sengkang proved this to be true. But what about GRCs like Jurong, Ang Mo Kio, and Pasir Ris Punggol? Does this theory still hold weight in those instances?
So I think you've got to look at two things. Firstly, it depends on the opposition there. So in Jurong, you had Red Dot United, which was officially formed, I think, about a month before polling day. In Ang Mo Kio, you have the Reform Party. It's contested the past 3 elections in Ang Mo Kio, but it's not considered one of the bigger parties. Certainly, it doesn't have the most mind share. And in Pasir Ris Punggol, again, you have a three-corner fight, and it's between two smaller parties and the PAP. So, you don't expect the kind of close margins you had in East Coast and West Coast, especially when another thing you have to look at is the minister contesting. So in Jurong, Ang Mo Kio, Pasir Ris Punggol, that's Senior Minister Staman, Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong, and Senior Minister Teo Chee Hean. And these are, the most senior members of the cabinet and probably the most well-known. Whereas in East Coast and Sengkang especially, the ministers were new. Deputy Prime Minister Heng Swee Keat moved over from Tampines, and Mr. Ng Chee Meng also moved over from a different GRC. They had less time on the ground, and they've also had less time in politics in general. So with that combination, you have quite a strong Oppo team in the East Coast and West Coast, plus a minister who hasn't had so much time in politics, and therefore that explains your narrower wins.
Now, for the opposition, a long-standing challenge has been attracting enough good candidates. That didn't seem to be the case for GE 2020. But has the definition of a good candidate changed? And moving forward, will we see more evenly matched candidates from both sides?
So I think at the core of it, a good candidate, right, is someone who can bring in the votes. And that means someone who can deliver what voters want. So in that sense, I don't think that has changed, but what has changed is what voters want. So in the past, you saw a lot of focus placed on academic qualifications. The PAP would say, look, these are the people who are going to lead the country, and people voted for them. And now we're trying to steer away from that notion that grades are everything. We've gone beyond that. So, in the PAP's lineup this time, you had people who perhaps didn't do so well in the formal school system, but at the end of the day, they're still successes in their own right. So we've gone beyond just academics. And people want diversity in background of the candidates, but they also want diversity in terms of the kind of voices in parliament. They don't want everyone there to be just from one party. And, they want people who make meaningful contributions to parliament who are not from the PAP. And as for evenly matched, I think certainly, because there used to be a certain stigma over joining opposition parties, but it's eroding very quickly. As you see, they've managed to get very good candidates this round, and people are starting to see that opposition parties can be a very constructive force for Singapore politics.
Right. Well, Linette, figures show that PAP's vote share in 5-member GRCs was almost 11 points lower than in SMC. So looking ahead to the next GE, what's the possibility of a revival of 3-member GRCs?
Well, I think it's not very likely. To me, the sweet spot for the PAP seems to be 4 or maybe 5-member GRCs, because so on one hand, the smaller GRCs mean that you can cut your losses, but it also means that the opposition has to find a smaller good team to contest that GRC. So they do have a higher chance of winning. And with smaller GRCs, you would naturally have more constituencies because GRCs have a certain population limit. So even though Right now, you have the PAP having perhaps quite narrow wins in certain GRCs, but with three-man GRCs, they might end up losing more constituencies altogether. So the way I see it, the benefits are quite limited, and unless the PAP is very confident of winning, I don't think we will see three-man GRCs anytime soon.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your insights, Linette. We've been speaking to Linette Lai, political correspondent at the Straits Times.